Filipino Americans are the third largest Asian American group in the United States. They make up around 2.6 million eligible voters, and in 2024, over 2 million of them cast their ballots nationwide. That level of participation means the Filipino American vote is no longer a small ripple. It is a growing wave that can help decide tight races in presidential, Senate, and state elections, especially in key states like California, Nevada, Hawaii, and Texas. In this video, I'm going to break down how Filipino Americans voted in the 2024 election, what shaped their decisions, and what this could mean for the future of U.S. politics. Historically, Filipino Americans have leaned toward the Democratic Party, particularly in presidential elections. This trend became more visible in the 1990s and early 2000s, as many Filipino immigrants aligned with Democratic stances on immigration, labor rights, healthcare, and social safety nets. In 2008 and 2012, Barack Obama received strong support from the Filipino American community, with estimates placing support at around 65 to 70%. In 2016, about 71% of Filipino American voters supported Hillary Clinton, while only around 25% voted for Donald Trump. In 2020, Joe Biden continued to enjoy majority support from Filipino Americans, with exit polls and AAPI surveys showing that roughly 68% backed him. However, even then, there were signs of shifting dynamics, especially among older voters and Filipino Americans living in more conservative-leaning states. There are several factors behind these shifts. Filipino Americans are a diverse group, including both naturalized immigrants and U.S.-born citizens, healthcare workers, veterans, small business owners, and multi-generational families. Many maintain strong religious beliefs, particularly Catholic values, which often influence their positions on issues like abortion and same-sex marriage, positions more closely aligned with Republican platforms. Some Filipino Americans are also drawn to the Republican Party's emphasis on entrepreneurship, lower taxes, law and order, and strong military funding, especially since many Filipinos serve or have family members serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. At the same time, younger Filipino Americans, especially those born in the U.S., tend to identify as more progressive. They often prioritize issues such as climate change, racial justice, reproductive rights, and access to education and healthcare. These voters remain solidly aligned with the Democratic Party. In other words, while the overall lean has been Democratic, the Filipino American vote is not monolithic. Generational divides, religious values, regional influences, and personal economic interests all contribute to an increasingly complex and evolving political identity. The 2024 presidential election was a pivotal moment for Filipino American voters, reflecting a nuanced and evolving political identity. While the Democratic candidate, former Vice President Kamala Harris, maintained a majority of support among Filipino Americans, her share of the vote decreased compared to past elections. Estimates from multiple exit polls and surveys suggest that Harris secured roughly 55 to 57% of the Filipino American vote nationwide. In contrast, President Donald Trump improved his standing within this community, earning close to 35 to 40%, an increase from the approximately 25 to 30% he captured in 2020. This shift was not uniform but varied significantly by geography and demographic factors. In key battleground states such as Nevada, Texas, and Hawaii, Filipino American voters showed a greater willingness to support Republican candidates. For example, in Nevada, detailed exit polling revealed that Trump won a narrow majority of Asian American voters, largely attributable to the Filipino American subset. Analysts link this shift to heightened concerns about immigration policy, economic pressures like inflation, and a strong emphasis on family and religious values. These issues resonated particularly with older, first-generation Filipino immigrants. Economic factors played a critical role in influencing voter decisions. Many Filipino Americans reported that rising costs of living, housing affordability, and job security were top priorities during the 2024 election cycle. These concerns led some voters to question whether the incumbent party's policies were effectively addressing their needs. This contributed to the narrowing Democratic margin. At the same time, issues such as education policy, especially debates over school curricula and parental involvement, also motivated parts of the community. Filipino American families, often with multi-generational households, expressed diverse views on these topics. Some favored more conservative approaches promoted by Republican platforms. Generational differences remained a defining feature of voting patterns. Younger Filipino Americans, many of whom are U.S.-born and engaged with progressive social movements, overwhelmingly supported Harris and the Democratic ticket. Their priorities included climate change action, reproductive rights, social justice, and affordable education. Meanwhile, older voters, many of whom immigrated as adults, were more likely to vote Republican. They were influenced by social conservatism, Catholic values, and concerns over immigration enforcement. Religious faith, particularly Catholicism, continued to shape voter behavior, as many Filipino Americans balanced deeply held spiritual beliefs with political considerations. This dynamic often resulted in complex voting decisions that did not fit neatly into party lines. Overall, the 2024 election underscored Filipino Americans as a diverse and influential voting bloc whose preferences are shaped by a combination of economic realities, cultural values, and generational perspectives. Their growing population and high voter turnout rates make them an increasingly important factor in U.S. elections, especially in swing states where their voices can tip the balance. Let's take a closer look at the issues that mattered most to Filipino American voters in 2024. While we touched on some earlier, now we're diving into the ones that truly shaped voter decisions. Based on exit polls and community surveys, 3 issues stood out: inflation, immigration policy, and abortion rights. The rising cost of living was the #1 concern for many Filipino American households. Inflation made it harder to afford basic needs like groceries, gas, rent, and utilities. A large percentage of the Filipino community works in healthcare, hospitality, education, and small business. These are sectors where wages often didn't keep pace with inflation, and that created stress across families and generations. A 2024 AAPI voter survey found that over 70% of Filipino Americans listed the economy and jobs as a top voting issue. Many were drawn to candidates who promised to reduce inflation, bring down healthcare costs, and support working-class families. Economic security wasn't just about personal finances. For many Filipino immigrants, it also meant being able to support relatives back home in the Philippines, something that rising prices made more difficult. Immigration was another key issue, especially for first-generation Filipino Americans and those still trying to reunite with family members. Many in the community have experienced delays in visa processing or have relatives stuck in long backlogs for family-sponsored immigration. These frustrations made immigration policy a top concern. At the same time, views on enforcement and border control were not uniform. Older, more conservative voters tended to support stricter policies and emphasize legal pathways. Meanwhile, younger Filipino Americans and those aligned with progressive values pushed for comprehensive immigration reform, better protections for undocumented immigrants, and more humane treatment at the border. In fact, according to the same AAPI survey, about 61% of Filipino American voters supported providing undocumented immigrants with a pathway to citizenship. That shows the community's interest in compassionate and practical solutions, especially when family and fairness are involved. Abortion and reproductive health care became a defining issue in this election, especially after the 2022 Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade. Despite the Catholic roots of many Filipino families, a majority of Filipino Americans actually support legal access to abortion. Pew Research and Asian American voter studies have consistently shown that around 60 to 70% of Filipino Americans believe abortion should remain legal in most or all cases. In 2024, this became a motivator for many voters, particularly women and younger adults who saw the issue as not just about religion or politics, but about healthcare, bodily autonomy, and personal freedom. For many, the fear of rolling back rights they believed were already settled law became a strong reason to vote. It also contributed to higher voter turnout among younger Filipino Americans, who tend to be more socially progressive than older generations. In the 2024 election, Filipino Americans shaped outcomes in several key states, particularly those with large and active Filipino communities. While California has the highest overall number of Filipino residents, it's not the only state where their votes carried weight. In Hawaii, where 1 in 4 residents is of Filipino descent, Filipino Americans are no longer just a demographic group, they are an electoral force. The community has deep roots in the state going back to the early 1900s, and today they hold positions in local government, education, and unions. In 2024, Filipino voters were instrumental in Democratic wins across state and congressional races. Candidates openly courted the Filipino vote, campaigning at churches, holding events at Filipino community centers, and even producing campaign materials in Ilocano and Tagalog. In Nevada, particularly in Clark County, Filipino Americans make up the largest Asian subgroup. Many work in healthcare, hospitality, and service sectors, and labor unions representing Filipino workers were active in get-out-the-vote efforts. Their support proved crucial in a closely contested Senate race that was decided by fewer than 10,000 votes. California still leads in numbers, with over 1.5 million Filipino Americans, especially concentrated in Southern California and the Bay Area. Cities like Carson, Daly City, and Vallejo have Filipino majorities or pluralities. While the state leans Democratic, Filipino Americans have been vocal on issues like education, public safety, and anti-Asian hate crimes, often shifting their support based on candidate positions rather than party loyalty. In Texas, the Filipino population is growing rapidly in cities like Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. Many are young professionals and nurses, and while the community isn't yet a swing vote, their increasing engagement signals future political influence. The same can be said for Florida, where the Filipino population, though smaller, is active in areas like Tampa and Jacksonville. Even in Arizona and Georgia, where the Filipino populations are relatively small, their votes were mobilized through churches, Filipino grocery stores, and community groups. These states saw record Asian American turnout, and Filipino Americans were part of that rise, especially among second-generation voters. Filipino Americans also tend to have higher than average voter turnout rates, and that civic engagement is magnified in close races. In short, they are no longer a quiet demographic. They are now a voting bloc with the power to tip the scales. Filipino Americans are no longer just a quiet part of the Asian American electorate. With their high voter turnout, diverse perspectives, and growing numbers in key states, they have become a crucial force in shaping American elections. The 2024 election showed that Filipino American voters are thoughtful and engaged, balancing economic concerns, immigration issues, and deeply personal values like reproductive rights. As younger generations become more politically active and communities continue to grow, the Filipino American vote will only become more influential in years to come. For candidates and parties, understanding the diversity within this community is essential. Filipino Americans are not a monolith. They bring a rich blend of experiences, beliefs, and priorities that defy simple labels. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more videos about life in the Philippines. And if you want to learn more, Be sure to check out my other video, Why Does the Philippines Remain Poor? See you in the next one. Bye for now.